Hi, welcome to the Church Split. My name is Will, and yes, I did bleach my hair. I thought I would try to make it look well with my logo. Just kidding. So quarantine makes you do funny things. So real quick, I just want to clarify with y'all, I was hanging out with some friends, and he bleached his hair, and then I gave into peer pressure, and I bleached mine. So now I'm just bringing back the 90s, baby. But that's not what we're here for today. Today, we have a special guest with us, and this is my brother-in-law. His name is Drew Wright. They are missionaries, or they do deaf missions, and there's a bit of a story here. And Drew and I are very close, and as we're doing some waves of interviews right now, I wanted to make sure that we had some people on that I'm familiar with as we work our way to other people as well. But Drew, we're going to bring him on the show right now. So, hello, Drew. Are you looking up right now?
Howdy.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I've been talking to you for the past 30 minutes, but now I have to try to create this artificial talk. So, for those of you who are watching,
because we have to, comply to the construct that is this interview.
Okay, that's weird. But so for those who don't know, if I'm constantly looking away from the cameras because his monitor is down here, so we can make room for the camera. So I promise I'm not trying to avoid eye contact with you. But anyway, so Drew, real quick, so obviously you and I how long have you been married to my sister?
It'll be 10 years this year, actually.
Is it really 10 years?
Yeah, because we were married in 2010.
That's
you
insane.
Were there.
I shut up. I'm aware. My hair was a different color back then. Anyway. So I'm going to make a lot of references to it because it's funny. But, all right. So you've been married to my sister for 10 years, and you have, 4 boys? Right?
Last time I counted, there was 4 of them. We have 4 boys, Charles, Josiah, Timothy, and Elliot. They are ages 8 and down, all the way down to 2. And they're fantastic. They're a lot of work. They're super busy, but they're a joy.
Yeah, they're absolutely a nightmare too. But just kidding. Depending on the day. Okay. So what do you do right now for work? And then we're going to hop into your background a little bit.
Right now, I am the program director and chief instructor at American Freestyle Karate in Salem, Virginia.
So basically, if I say anything wrong, what was that?
Yeah. Freestyle karate chop. Yeah. So basically, I help teach classes. I focus a lot on enrolling new students, upgrading students into the Black Belt Club, helping them set their goals, reach their goals, and all in all, just promote how awesome karate is everywhere I go.
Oh, nice. So you're just punching and kicking people everywhere. Is that how you demonstrate that?
Sometimes.
Kick him in the face. You want to know how to defend yourself against a face kick? Join my school.
Gotta stop that if you're one of my students.
So anyway, Drew, what is your background exactly? Because I think this is where things get interesting. So obviously we talk about controversial topics here, but also we talk about education. We talk about understanding other views and other perspectives, and we try to cover we're trying to cover more and more of a broad sense of things on this channel. And I think you have a different, certain flavor that some people can relate to. So can you just go ahead and tell me what your background is for those who don't know, and just kind of jump into it from there?
Sure. So I grew up in church. Both of my parents were professing believers. I used the past tense because my dad passed away when I was a baby. So growing up, it was just mom and me. The church that I went to, it had historically been a stronger, independent, fundamental Baptist church. The leadership had changed hands a few times by the time I got there, and a traditionally minded Baptist church, for sake of clarity. By the time I got there, it's not that they had moved away from that. It was kind of undefined, right? Like we used the King James, but we never talked about it. We sang hymns, but we never talked about why. So I kind of grew up kind of just in this nebulous, church is great. I learned a lot of foundational truths about the gospel, things like that. I felt the Lord calling me to ministry when I was around 15, 16. And then I had to pick a Bible college, and I picked Crown College of the Bible in Powell, Tennessee. And that was where my worldview really started to get defined. If you look at different personality types and whatever you subscribe to, whether it's the Myers-Briggs personality types or DISC profile or spiritual gifts or whatever, my personality is ENFP. One of the things that is true, and no matter what system I look at, is that I am pragmatic. And so when I went to Bible college and I saw a successful church, however you want to define that, at that time I defined it by big and lots of people, right? So I was people running a Bible college, and I was like, oh, so this works, so this must be right. So I made that correlation in my mind that if this works, then obviously God's blessing it and it's right. And so that was when I really started to become more traditional, fighting fundamentalist kind of Baptist. And don't get me wrong, I'm super grateful for my college experience. I mean, that's where I met my wife. That's where I met some of my best friends who I
like
still
myself.
Talk to. I mean, there were some negative things that came with the college, but you know. So you know, it was fantastic. I learned so much. I already knew some sign language because the church I grew up in, there was a deaf guy. While I was there, I really got involved in deaf ministry, and really felt burdened for the deaf and for the deaf in both in American ministries and in foreign ministries. And it was by my senior year that we surrendered to go and do deaf missions internationally. So
you've always been pretty well focused on deaf ministry, right?
Once I started actually like training for ministry, I mean, for a while I fought against it, right? I was involved in it, but like I kind of had got this idea that I wanted to be a big name preacher guy, invited to the big conferences and be on the platform. And you know, deaf ministry people don't do that usually. They're kind of just unknown behind the scenes people, and then I wanted to be out in front, like the known, you know, whatever.
I never got that with your personality at all.
Right. So God had to humble me over a couple of years, and finally, by my senior year, I had gotten my head on straight in terms of how much the world actually does or doesn't revolve around me, and I submitted to God's will then. And so then after that, I served as an assistant pastor and deaf ministry director at our church, at the church we were involved in at the time. Joined a missions agency, did the deputation thing. And we'll get into this later, I'm sure. But then I switched to a different missions agency and changed churches. And then now we believe that the door is closed for us to do international missions. And we're serving where we are. We started a deaf ministry at our church at Lakeside Baptist Church in Salem, Virginia. And here I am.
Very good. Okay, so that's really good job condensing your life story. So you were missionaries, you know, you're trying to do international deaf missions, and you're not now. And so just curious, what led to you stepping out of international missions? Now, granted, if you want to talk about your transition here, that's fine too. That you can go ahead.
Okay. So we'll deal with the transition maybe later. Okay. So as far as what led to us stepping out of that, because I think that can be really important for a lot of people. For us, Melinda and I, my wife, Melinda and I, are both really stubborn. We're both strong-headed, strong-willed people, right? And so we were in it to win it, you know, however you want to say it. We were dug in. We were going to be missionaries, no matter what. So it really took God beginning to work in our hearts and our lives and show us things. Again, I tend to be a practical person. With the missions agency that we were at before, we had been on deputation for 2 years. We had raised about 25% support. And then when we transitioned out because of different issues, which we'll get to later, I know, I lost pretty much all of my support, right? And I expected that. And it's, you know, whatever. And so then when we transitioned over, again, after about 2 years, we had gotten to not quite 15% support. Now, we were with ABWE, and their support level requirements were higher than the agency we were with before. So although it was 15% at this ABWE dollar amount, it was actually about the same amount. And we stalled out there again. And we started having this thing happening where we were staying sick a lot, to the degree that we couldn't go and schedule meetings and go and speak at churches because somebody was always sick enough that we had to stay home and care for them, or there was something disastrous that happened. The vehicle would break down, a part of the house would fall off, and then most recently, like, you know, Melinda cracked her leg in half, right? And so that slowed us down for a while. And so at that point, after like about, and that was going on for a little over a year.
I remember
Over
it
the
was
course
like
of that
every
year,
time I talked to you guys, another thing. Just like it's I imagine the meme with the dog with the house burning, and your guys are like, "This is fine.
This is fine. This is fine." Yeah, and so without telling each other, we had both started praying and asking God to show us whether or not He really wanted us to go to the mission field. Fast forward a year, Melinda's laid up in bed because she decided she wanted an extra ankle on the one leg, and we had the conversation where she and I kind of, I don't know, when you've been married for a while, your spousey sense starts tingling, and when one of those conversations is coming. And I had known for a couple days it was coming, but I tend to put off things that I don't like because that's healthy. And finally, she trapped me in the room, and we decided to have the conversation. And we both agreed, it just seems like God is leading us to not go. And I expected there to be like a period of mourning, almost, of like a sense of failure. We missed our chance. We messed it up. What? Now what? But there actually wasn't that. As we talked about it, we were filled with peace. We started talking about things that we could do if we stayed here in terms of ministering at our home church, working a job at the karate school. Because I had already, oddly enough, God had orchestrated that I had landed a really good job that I love and am passionate about. And it was like, we have these things in place. We're in a good position now. And just lots of joy and peace. And so then I met with our pastors, our senior pastor and our missions pastor. And we talked about it. And I told them the things that we had seen and what we had prayed about. And they agreed that they had kind of seen that. And they hadn't said anything to me yet, but I kind of got the feeling that they were thinking that way. And they were just waiting to see what God would do. And, and then, by the way, I found out afterwards we were telling our life group that we had decided to stay. One of the guys was like, "I've been praying for that since you got here." So it's your fault. No, but this was, it was a great thing. So that's how that came about. And the thing that's been really incredible about the whole time, about this whole thing, is that I don't think that we missed our call or that we made a wrong choice in pursuing ministry. And this is one of those things that has kind of transitioned for me as far as practical application of theology, is that I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that you have to be like dramatically called to go into ministry. And that if you have, then that's definitely what you're going to do. And if you don't have that sense, then you shouldn't even attempt it. I believe that God is just looking for people that love Him with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love their neighbor as themselves, and are willing to do whatever it is God wants them to do. And we'll just, how do you figure out God's will? And it's not, all right, God, show me. But you have to I believe you have to be actively seeking it out and trying things and trying to open doors and seeing what happens. And we tried to go through that door. I don't believe we waited too long. I think we learned things and experienced things. I don't believe that I would be where I am now in terms of my beliefs and my walk with Christ if I hadn't gone through and learned and seen some of the things that I saw. So I believe that it was all part of God's plan to lead me to this point, and I'm excited to see what's next.
Yeah, well, that's great, because so when you guys are talking, so this whole transitional thing's going on with you guys, and you mentioned a really great thing where you were like, hey, I'm not bitter about it. So, because I noticed a lot of people when I was at Bible college, they had this week-long missions conference. They really pushed out missions. And some people seems like they surrendered to missions under the peer pressure and then later fell through. And other people, I think, were honestly called like, yes, no, this is definitely what God wants for me, as I sought the Lord's will. So would you say that you fell into either one of those categories, or how would you say that whole thing happened?
It's a tough question, really, for me, because God is sovereign in all things, and there was definitely, like you said, there was missions conference, and there was talk about called to ministry as the highest calling of your life, and pastors and missionaries are exonerated as heroes of the faith, and some rightly so. guys that made history: Martin Luther, Adoniram Judson, Hudson Taylor, Eric, those guys. Yeah, so there are those guys, and there are those guys today. I believe that you could say are heroes of the faith, heroes of the faith. No, heroes of the faith. I'd say we can cut that out, but I know you won't.
Nope.
And so there was kind of a lifting up of a pedestal of a position that is worthy of honor, but it's also a servant's position, and is a difficult path to walk, and it's not for everybody. And I know, the leader of the college, you had heard it, he would go on, he would say, we need doctors, we need businessmen, we need that. But if you really are going to serve God, is kind of the feeling that I always got from it, whether or not that was intentional. And I'm not saying it was. That was just kind of how I always felt about it, how I always perceived it.
I think a lot of people felt the same way. They were like, "Oh, this is what we really do if we want to serve God. So we got to, yeah." I get it.
Right, and it's a Bible college. The whole thing it exists purely to train people for ministry. So if something like is kind of an if-then relation in my mind, if this exists, then it must be that important. So anyway, the pastors got a lot of honor and a lot of clout there, and I wanted that to a degree. There was a part of me that wanted that notoriety, which I already talked about that earlier. But even from a healthy position, I still wanted to be that guy, the leader, influencer of large groups of people, making a difference in a broad sense. But at the same time, like when I was 15, before I had seen all of that, when I felt God calling me into ministry to begin with, I fought him on it for a while, before I had a surrender moment. And I know I said earlier, I don't believe everybody needs that. I think certain personality types have to have that, hello, kind of wake up call.
The beating over the head with the God's 2x4. Yeah, I've experienced that.
So in a way, there was a pressure. But again, looking back with where this has brought me, I really do believe that it was God's path for me.
Well, good. I mean, so that's good because it doesn't mean you're bitter about it or you have any jaded feelings about it. So I think that's really fantastic because that our attitude about such life changes is drastic because that was years of your lives that you guys poured into trying to be international. But I know that you guys ended up switching missions boards, and there was this time that was actually pretty big. And this is actually, I think more the meat of it. I just wanted people to take time to get to know you today. But I think this is where the meat of our conversation really lies, which is over time, I know you experienced some various things in the traditional, I think that's the word you use, traditional Baptist realm, or maybe the fundamentalist Baptist realm, not round. So you change it. So I know there's some changes to your theological approach and what sort of things. There's some things that challenge your belief system. So my question is basically why, how, what. So talk to me about what happened to you as a Christian spiritually as you were confronted with certain things and influences that be or anything like that.
Sure. And I tend to use the phrases traditionalist or performance-based or contemporary as opposed to fundamentalist, because like that term means different things to different people, right? Like I am a fundamentalist as far as the fundamentals of the faith, but some of the baggage that gets attached to that phrase I'm not anymore. So I hate to admit this on the internet in front of a lot of people, but you had a large part to do with it, because as close as we were, I mean, I know most of your audience doesn't know this, but there was a time when we were both involved in ministry and we called and talked to each other every day, and we'd talk for like an hour at least most of the time. And we'd talk about everything from ministry to just nonsense, just talking. And when issues inevitably came up in the conversation, and looking back, I don't really even think you were on purpose bringing them up. Sometimes I think I was.
I tend to try in all legitimacy. That as much as people know me as the church split guy or the guy who writes the issues in the church blog, and Will's always stirring the pot. I get accused of that. I'm like, well, I have thoughts that I'll put out there, but when I'm having a conversation with people, I'm not pushing my view on them. I actually try to respect people's liberty. So I just go, hey, if you're following my ministry, this is what I think, but I'm not pushing that on you. So anyway, continue.
Right, and so we would have these conversations and about issues, issue-centric things like the Bible version. Excuse me, the Bible version, the music issue, dress standards. Kind of, we would talk a lot about the big three, within that world of that realm of Christianity, and then we talk about other theological things. What?
Real quick, could you just quickly explain that thought? Because I know there's probably some people here who don't understand why those are the big three. Like, just a real quick snippet of what they are. Because there are people like music.
Right,
Depend on the background.
Right. So I was part of a movement, and this is part of where Will and I both have come from to a degree. Is there was King James onlyism, and different strains of that if you really want to get into it. But King James onlyism. Music standards would be, hymns only, psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs.
And what do we say about drums, Drew? What do we say about drums?
They're the devil.
That's right.
Yeah, no, drums are not allowed ever for any reason, unless you're a missionary from Africa, and then that's cool.
You're not wrong.
I know, and then so yeah, piano, organ, classical instruments, guitar, but you couldn't play it too cool. You kind of had to play it either bluegrassy or classical style. You couldn't really like.
And it had to be acoustic.
I even heard right, yeah. Well, yeah, it depends, but usually, yeah. I even heard a guy in a message or a lesson one time talk about syncopated rhythm is evil in nature, and which is like, have you what that term means? Because I know
syncopation is a very
using that word. Yeah. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll let you explain that some other time because you're the music guy. And so that's the music issue, and then dress standards. Ladies have to wear skirts or dresses or culottes all the time. Men should wear collared shirt, khaki pants, or jeans without fades, holes, or tears. So you got to get grandpa's jeans, and shirt and tie worn to church most, if not all the time. And I know I'm saying in a way that could sound like I'm criticizing them for it. I'm really not. It's just that was what was touted as these are the standards, and these are issues that that they're a good solid church or a good solid Christian if they have the right stance on these things, is how that would get handed down. So we would talk about those issues, the big three. Ed, he would Will would ask me questions like, yeah, but where do you find that in the Bible? And I said, well, I'd cite some verse, and he'd say, but does it really say that? What about this? And he'd present an alternative argument, and then I would find myself in a corner and unable to get out of it, and I'd just be like, well, I gotta go, bye, or change the subject.
Do you remember there was one time you and I were serving in the same church, and you were traveling abroad trying to get international ministers, and I was serving in the church, and something came up because the pastor there got upset that I took off my suit jacket when I was interpreting for the deaf. And
oh yeah,
and it turned into this thing, and you were kind of defending him. You kind of got a little hot about it. It was like the only time I've ever seen you mildly irritated, and I was like, but it's not in the Bible.
Right, and even then, it was because I had been taught. I don't know how to classify, but I had just basically been taught that as the assistant pastor, you support God's man, and even if it's this is basically verbatim, that even if it's an issue that he might be wrong about, you don't publicly out him for that. You stand by him, and then you can try to have a conversation with him about it later, which I tried to follow that procedure.
Which, of course, I took it off for practical reasons while interpreting, but that's interpreting for the deaf, your arms, and there's a lot of this going on.
Your arms go all over the place. I mean, just arms everywhere. And if you're wearing a suit jacket, if you've ever worn a suit jacket, especially when you've bought one that's the correct size, most people buy suit jackets too big, but if you buy one that's actually the correct size, you lift your arms up here, and the shoulder blades are up past your earlobes, and you're like, it's off. So it's not fun to interpret in a suit jacket, and it's also hard on the suit jacket in some ways. especially if you leave it. But that's beside the point. So yeah, that was the thing. So we would have these conversations, and I started working through some of these issues, and then as I was on deputation, right? So we're having these conversations. I'm examining some of these issues, and I'm traveling to all of these different churches within the movement that I was in. And I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't want it to sound like I'm making a broad generalization. I'm not saying that all of these churches are this way. I'm not saying that all of the churches that I went to were this way. But a lot of them were, a scary amount of them. I would go and I would not hear preaching would be issue centric and not Bible based. It would be I call them skyscraper sermons, just one story after another, and and it was in church was not, and the way that the preacher would often communicate, it wasn't the Spirit of Christ. It wasn't truth sprinkled with mercy and grace. It was I started seeing a lot of, well, bless God we're right, and thank God we're right, and thank God we're not them, And I eventually I even started feeling like embarrassed, and like I had to constantly apologize for my own movement. Like it's like, well, we're not all that way.
I know the feeling when I tell people, I'm like, oh, I pastor the blah, blah, blah Baptist church. They're like, Baptist? I'm like, not that Baptist. And I remember I'm always having to give caveats.
I've got a cool website.
Yeah, I'm like giving caveats all the time. Like, and I understand. So you're good.
Right. And so those were some of the things that challenged my belief system, was seeing all of that. And it was when I was able to kind of divorce myself from the emotional arguments, the rhetoric, and the pseudo spirituality that was attached to a lot of these things, that I was able to see it clearly. That was when I was like, this doesn't really hold water. You introduced me to Dr. James White, and although I don't know if you've addressed him, things that he talks about on your videos.
I think I've mentioned him before. Basically, I'm pretty open to the fact I'm not Calvinistic in any way. So there's certain things James White is really good at. I wouldn't adhere to everything, but I think that we could say that about most teachers. But we can at least acknowledge their good work when they do good work.
Right, and his articles, debate, lectures, videos about the Bible translation issue, the Bible version issue, those are like the premier thing to go to.
They're kind of when you're King James onlyist, they're kind of world shattering. You're like,
and for me it was when I was able to remove the emotion in the spirit, just say, okay, let's look at the facts, let's look at the history, let's look at how we actually got the Bible. That was when everything changed for me, because I had seen that what I was taught wasn't accurate.
I remember when you guys got your New American Standard Bibles, you thought you were so hip, and I was like, I'm proud.
So that was, but so as I was working through that and looking at the facts and seeking truth, and really learning how to think and study those things for myself, and that's hard, especially, I know people really love James Peterson, some people don't, but for me, his stuff about how to write an essay, how to think things through, et cetera, those things really helped me in this process to say, okay, how am I doing? What am I looking at here? Anyway, I think I've kind of gotten off track from the question, but so spiritually, it was turbulent for a while, and I did experience some guilt once I had transitioned out, because it's like, I believed these things that are incorrect, and I preached to them, I taught them, I even discipled them. I have a disciple that's at a particular college that I wouldn't recommend it at this point, just because of their worldview and their stance on certain issues. And I had a large part in sending him there, and I'm still proud of him that he's following God, of course, and trying to do what he believes is best. And what I had to come to terms with is that in a very real sense, I was deceived, not necessarily intentionally, Because we've talked about this, that there are people who are passing down these teachings that were deceived themselves and are deceiving others, not out of maliciousness, but they genuinely believe it's the truth, and they're trying to do it from the right position and with the right spirit and attitude. And that's kind of where I was. So I kind of went through a grieving period of I was wrong about a large portion of my life. I realized, it wasn't on purpose. I wasn't ignoring the facts. And once I started really looking at it, then I obeyed God and moved forward. Then I was able to move past some of that. I don't know. Did I answer your question? I kind of went on a rabbit trail.
No, that's fine. No, I think you did. And I think you kind of explained some of the things, because that gets to actually, you brought it to a perfect place, actually. So, because I remember I went through similar things. As I started looking at things critically, it happened to me at a younger age, but you and I have very different personalities. So I know my personality, my brain type, even when I subscribed to them, like, this is the way it is, I kept going, why? And I'm like, and I'd come up with reasons, and I'm like, but then my mind automatically gives me the counterpoints. I'm like, that makes more sense. No. Stay away from me, mistress. I am married to this, and it was, and that was my struggle exactly, until I realized the fact that I actually could not hold it. And me, I tend to be kind of a robot emotionally, much like Melinda. And so for me, I'm like, I'm all about the facts. And so I'm like, but the facts, these are the facts, and I can't ignore that. And I always say that, emotions aren't bad, but but they have to have the framework of the facts. If you don't have the framework of the facts, then your emotions are just doing whatever they want to do, and they need to be, there needs to be a framework for them to work in. Yeah, my dance moves. So you kind of coined a phrase that I've used from here on out when I'm talking to my friends, because I reach a large audience that deals with fundamentalist Baptists, mainly because that's my background. But you coined a phrase that has always stuck with me, which is simply performance-based Christianity. When you said that, it actually was like, that's it, because a lot of people, we judge each other and people's spirituality based on whether or not they fit certain criteria of our preferences, and we're not necessarily maybe holding it to scriptural value and stuff. So can you expound on your experience of performance-based Christianity, and just kind of, can you flesh that out for me, that concept?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. Because a lot of people like to use the term legalist in legalism, and it's it's a term that is not. I think at this point it's not well understood what you mean by it when you say it in general.
It's a loaded
term. Because my take on it has always been, a legalist is somebody who believes you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to be saved. And then they'll take the backwards truth that then if you're not doing Z, Y, and X, then you're not saved. So that's kind of where I encapsulate legalism. And that's not what I was in. That's not what I was taught. I was always taught salvation by grace through faith. That it was only through the work of Jesus, and even that it wasn't Jesus and works that saved you. It was just Jesus, right? So performance-based Christians are people who believe that, but then beyond getting saved, they believe that in order to please God, and that you kind of can earn merit and favor with God by doing X, Y, and Z. And that if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then you're either out of fellowship with God, or you might not be saved, because, the proof is in the pudding kind of a thing. And that's a fine line there between the two. But most of the people I dealt with were on this side, where they really believed in salvation by grace through faith, but then they also added these things afterward, right?
God, you missed a few things. Let me help you out.
Well, it's not even that. It's like, okay, so God gave us this book, and this book is the manual for how to please Him. And this is my bullet journal, not. But anyway, so this is the manual for how to please Him. And so there must be things that I find in here that will help me earn favor with God after I'm saved. The big problem with that is it's not in the Bible. Either you're out of fellowship with God and you're unregenerate and you're separated from God forever, or you're saved. You're an adopted son because of the justification of Christ in taking positional justification, right? Because they'll even teach that and then add this thing. It's like, well, no, those don't work together. Either you're positionally justified and in favor with God, or you have to earn it. And it's what I had to learn, and I'm still learning. Sometimes I still find myself having to unlearn things. Is that it's all grace. It's all God's grace and And God's favor is bestowed upon us because of his Son, not because of anything that we do.
And of course, that's where Paul goes, that doesn't mean we should sin, so that grace may abound. But it's just the fact that my Christianity not ought to be performance-based, right?
Say it again.
That's where Paul was saying, that's why we can't sin, so that grace may abound. So it's not saying that, we get to just do whatever we want, but the fact is that we need to be focused on Christ.
Right, because God is holy, and there are sins. There are, bleaching your hair. No, I'm just kidding. There are things that God clearly lays out as sin.
Actually, you know what's funny is that there are people in that circle. A lot of people would say that it is sin.
I know. That's why I said it. But yeah, so and yeah. Sorry, I got so distracted by your stupid hair. Right. So there are sins, and there is being out of fellowship with God because of sin, even after you're saved, because you've committed a sin and you haven't confessed and repented and got restored your relationship with God in that sense. But then as soon as you do that, you're back in 100% favor with God. You don't have to earn it by witnessing this much, passing out this many tracts, dressing this way, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes this performance-based system where you can test, okay, how spiritual was I this past week? How spiritual was I? What are my spiritual goals for tomorrow? And not all of them are this way. I mean, there are some of the leaders within that type of movement, performance-based Christianity. They are wolves, and they are power mongers. Those do exist. And I don't pretend or fool myself into saying that they don't. But I believe that most of the people that are in that kind of a movement, they genuinely love God, and they genuinely believe that there's a list of things they have to do in order to please him. And it's a shame because you don't, but you do. In that, Jesus summarized it, right?
Right.
2 things: love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that's been my big thing for the past year that I've been chewing on and thinking about is loving God and loving people. And that's the ultimate expression of Christianity. That's what you have to do to walk in a way, to walk worthy, of our calling and our salvation.
It is really funny when you actually really start munching on those 2 commands, like, oh man, there's a lot there. So,
Simple, but so difficult.
But so difficult. Yeah, it's so true. You cut out there for a second. All I heard was you screaming, just so difficult. But yes.
I mean, there's no way I could love you without the help of Jesus, Will, and it's just how it goes.
That is the truth. I look in the mirror every day and go, man, you got a face only Jesus could love.
Woo.
So real quick, what you're really talking about in a sense is the fact that you were kind of grown and marred and molded and shaped into this performance-based system, which really kind of deals with like indoctrination. I've actually described a lot of what I was raised like in that world as very cult-ish, and I don't think they mean to be cult-like, but it simply is the facts. This is the information. You cannot read this because that information goes against what we say. Therefore, it is the devil, and so it's things that should be shunned. And we know a lot of people that once they started doing this, they fell away. And I remember hearing them say phrases like "fall away," "get away from God," and what they really meant was the fact that they just don't use the King James maybe or whatever. So it's like, well, aren't they still pastoring a church? I thought they loved the same Jesus we love. No, not the Jesus of the King James. Okay, I didn't realize there's different ones. But anyway, so
man, I got like 4 different Jesuses here then, because I got my NKJV, my ESV, my NASB, and my KJV. Which one you want?
No. You got a bunch of perversions. The KJB is the one. Okay, we're not going to worry about
KJB. Let's unpack that issue.
No. Let's not.
We don't have that much time.
We don't have that much time. Might be a fun thing for you and I to talk about those sometime. So, really quick. So,
yeah, sure.
when it comes down to it, so I'm just trying to get, like, the reason why I have you here is because I think your story is unique in the sense that you have been one of the people who have had to look at the way they've always believed and realize it was a lie. I did a similar scenario, you know that. But I think a lot of people get tricked into this, and it's really an indoctrination kind of camp. And can you just tell me real fast before we kind of come to a conclusion here, but what was there like an Achilles heel that really just like, this is what broke me? This is the moment that I know that you and I had a lot of conversations. And then what was funny is that some of my conversations that we talked about, you'd go to travel to a church and you'd see that issue come into real life, and then you'd be like, this crazy thing happened. I'm like, yeah, that's what I've been saying. And it was just funny because I think that's what it is. So it's not even so much me as much as it was just, you heard somebody else say it, then you went and witnessed it, and then it was like giving yourself a different perspective where you're going, oh, maybe I was a little. So what was there an Achilles heel situation, or even an issue that just kind of snapped for you?
There was three things that all worked together. One was I studied one of my pet topics now to talk to people about is abstain from the appearance of evil. Okay?
Oh, that's a fun one.
If you're not, for those who aren't familiar with the world that we came from, that issue, you can't look to them because people don't know what movie you might be watching, so you have to abstain from doing anything that would make it appear like you're doing evil. So there's different degrees people take that. Some people, go ahead.
There's a video on this channel I do have about that. If you want to just check it out, go there and check it out. I explain the issue biblically if you're from this background. Continue.
You should watch it. I mean, I read your article back when that was all you had, and then I studied it myself. So the college that I went to, I was trained in how to study Greek. So I went back to the Greek text, and hashed it out. And an accurate translation would actually have been not so much abstain from the appearance, as in don't look like you're doing evil, but the word appearance actually had the idea of appears, when evil appears, when it shows up, when it pops up, abstain from it. So and if you look at some of the other versions, I didn't look at other versions, just to clarify. Before I just went from my King James to the Greek, did my translation work, came up with my version of that verse, if you will, my translation work of the verse, and then I looked at other versions afterwards. And I found that a lot of them agreed that the translation was accurately, when evil appears, flee from it, right? Run from it. And so that kind of made me go, oh, this is not good. And then at the same time, I had been, while I was on deputation, I was, and again, take this for what it's worth, that I'm not criticizing that movement of churches as a whole, but the churches that the majority of churches that I experienced when I was traveling.
You won't, I will.
I was so starved. What?
So you won't, but I will. Continue.
I was so starved for solid, biblically based preaching that I began searching for it on the internet, on YouTube. And I came across two guys, Francis Chan and David Platt. And I listened to one of their sermons, a couple of their sermons every day for about 2 weeks. And at the end of that 2 weeks, not that I was doing it on 2 weeks for a purpose, that was just the time frame that I looked back. In the course of 2 weeks of listening to some of their sermons on and off, I heard more gospel than I had heard in 2 years. And I saw more of a spirit of Christ, a spirit of love, of not being unrighteously angry over sin, but grieving over sin, grieving over the lost, searching to please and find God for who he is and worship him and love people. I saw more of that in 2 weeks than I had seen in 2 years. And I looked back at the attitude and the way that the movement that I had been in, the way they carried themselves and related to others. And it was like, this is not right. Something's wrong. And so then at that point, the one thing that was holding me back was the Bible version issue. So I did the thing where you go and you listen to the other side's argument and you try to disprove them, right?
Oh, don't you hate that? That's what got me on that's what got me on the alcohol thing. I was like, I'm going to disprove you. Crap.
Abort. Anyway, so I started trying to disprove it, and I had been taught, and I don't want to steal your thunder for your videos that are coming up, so I'm just going to nutshell it. I have been taught that the King James Version was the pure version, the full revelation of God, because of the text that it was translated from, the Textus Receptus, and that there were two Greek manuscripts, only two. One was the Textus Receptus, which came from the Byzantine area, which we know that there was apostolic presence there, and so that was a pure text. The other one is the Alexandrian text, which is the critical text, and there's some guys that would even say, in the critical text, the name should tell you it's wrong. That's not what that means. It's not critical. Anyway. And then that came from Alexandria, Egypt, which, oftentimes in the Bible, Egypt is a picture of falling into sin or going into evil, and so it's like God. And there was no apostolic presence there, which historically that's arguable, very arguable. And so that text is obviously corrupted. And so you have the pure text that only the King James is translated from, and then you have this corrupt text that every single other version of the Bible is translated from. And I believed that hook, line, and sinker because, again, I was a pragmatist. So it's like, if this works, this college and this church, this works, and God is blessing it, then this must be right.
Well, also, just in general, first off, black and white is always easier for us to go like, yes, no, got it. And so there's a pragmatic issue there. It's easy to understand. And also, when you don't hear any counterpoints, it's easy to buy things hook, line, and sinker. So continue. Sorry.
Right. And I never really listened to people that use contemporary Bible versions arguments for why from their perspective. I would hear people in my camp tell me what they said, which I found out is not what they say. But anyway, so then when I started really studying it, and I'm not going to go into all of the truth as far as how it is actually translated, just in short, that's not true. That's not historically how we got the Bible. It's not how it was translated. There's more than two texts. A lot more than two texts. I don't remember the number. I know you probably can rattle it off.
About 25,000 New Testament scripts. If you get everything all together, apparently it's about 54,000. Those are the large inclusive numbers. You can get more conservative on XYZ, but I'm just giving you the general. Yeah, and then you go into the translation principles that we're more likely as human nature, as we're copying things, as we're scribing things, we're more likely to add than to take away. And so then it's interesting when you look at the TR that it has things in it that no other text has, and it has these bizarre additions. And when the TR was being worked on, there was no Book of Revelation available to the, and I always forget the names of the people. Was it Erasmus? I don't. Yeah, Erasmus did the Textus Receptus. So yeah.
Yeah. So and then Erasmus had it was like, okay, well, if you want to do it, you have to have it done by X, Y, and Z. And he suddenly produced the Book of Revelation. He backward translated it from the Latin Vulgate, and so that's what's in the TR. Is the Revelation is a backwards translation from the Latin Vulgate. So it's like, so are you sure that it came from And so once I came to grips with that and realized, okay, well, here's the facts, then that was the releasing moment when I felt peace and comfort and knew that it was time to change. And that was when we made the transition. So the Achilles heel was threefold. It was the attitude, the abstain from the appearance of evil argument, studying out for myself and finding out that what I had been taught for years was wrong, and then the Bible translation issue. Yeah,
so it's funny because yours are similar to mine. Like those would be some 3-1s for me. I think mine was, instead of the translation issue, is the music issue, because I'd already gotten so accustomed to I guess alcohol too. I don't know. I went through a really weird year and a half period where I just dove into everything, and my entire worldview just kept shattering one after like dominoes, and I was like, no, everything I believed was a lie. And I just remember going through that. It's something that I just remember when you went through that. And I have a friend of mine who's going through it now, and some other people I've talked to that have. It is so cool though to see how God works in it, because I remember seeing you spiritually just kind of take off, and like even these areas where you may have been originally complacent, like in a sense you started. I'm not sure if man up is the right word, but I just remember you shifting from like this one more goofy You've always been goofy. I'm goofy. We're goofy. It's fine. But like I just remember you were kind of you're kind of apathetic in so many different areas, and then you just started to become more passionate, because I think what was happening is that those things were actually handcuffs holding you back from being able to truly experience what it means to live in God and live in his presence. So,
and just being really honest, I was afraid that I was wrong for a long time. I kind of had a feeling, and I was afraid that I was wrong. And so rather than dealing with it, I would take the path of apathy, the path of least resistance. You'd be like, I'm not worried about that. That's not that big of a deal, when some of them were.
Yeah, and obviously, and it has crippled. And the thing is that because of these movements, that's actually in many ways. So I said I'll be there. I'll be the one who throws shade because I know you don't. But it actually has hurt the cause of Christ in so many ways. A lot of people won't walk into a church ever again because of the horrible things they've experienced in such circles. So I think it's important that we, that it's one of those things where like, well, let's just make it about the facts first, and let's really take. And it's okay to not be right. And that's one of the things that took me a while because I'm a stubborn cat. You know that. It rhymed and it wasn't supposed to. Anyway, but
you're a poet and weren't aware of the fact.
So the thing is this whole. I just remember now going like, okay, it's okay not to always be right, and it's okay to have it pretty wrong. That's why a lot of times on my page when I'm like, did I say something factually incorrect? Because I want to be corrected. I don't want to be like propagating lies. So right. I feel like you and I could talk about this for a very long time. So just to kind of land this plane a little bit. So since we focus obviously on unity and also church splitting ideals, and I think that's the irony of this channel, right? Like we talk about controversial topics, but
here's how to split
it. Exactly. But it's like, okay, there's controversial topics. Let's let the facts be the facts. But at the same time, can we have a spirit of unity and decency with one another? Like as much as I think certain movements are dangerous and I have my issues with them, I still, they're still my brothers and sisters in Christ, and many of them don't know better on some of these issues. But since we focus so much on unity and church splitting ideals here, what would your advice be to people who have experienced the same thing? And what sort of reactions did you get, and how did you handle those responses personally? So what would your advice be, and how did you handle reactions when this happened?
Yeah, so advice is study and think. Learn to think. If you don't know or you're not sure that you know how to critically think, read Jordan Peterson's stuff. Especially his stuff about writing an essay and how if you can write, you can think. And then pick the issues that are the hills you would die on right now. The big issue, whatever it is, and then study it as objectively as you possibly can. And yeah, there are people on both sides of the fence. There are people who will, with love and grace, present their argument on both sides. And then there are people that will, with venom and just a wicked attitude, present their argument too. And so you have to learn that, like, okay, the vocal minority is not the majority, right? Mm-hmm. You have to learn to suss out those people and find the ones that are presenting articulate arguments. I don't have a good resource of those. There's things that I've stumbled across and found in my own time, and I didn't bother saving them because I didn't think about that. But anyway,
if you have any of such questions, that's why this page exists. If you have questions, go to our Facebook page, ask a question, send me a message. I'll send you a resource if I got one. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So study them from both sides. Look at what your camp, for lack of a better phrase, says, and look at what the other camp says, and really try to objectively look at the facts and pray about it. Don't take the spirituality out of it. Pray about it. Ask God to show it to you, and He will. And so study and think is the advice.
Right. And so when you're studying, be aware of confirmation bias, that you're going to be biased to your own side. So really think critically of the opposite side. So continue. Sorry, keep cutting you off.
Right. And that's hard. And I don't know that I have a good way for how to not do that. For me, it was studying that abstain from the appearance of evil and being able to look at it and say, that's not what this text says. And it doesn't matter what kind of argument you come up with for why it means what it means. Word definitions are word definitions, and that's the beauty of the Greek language, is that it's so precise. Whereas in English, the word appearance, you can have some wiggle room for what it means, and you can apply it in different ways. But when you go back to what it actually comes from in Greek, there is no wiggle room. It doesn't mean looks like. It's a verb when evil shows up. Anyway, like I said, that's one of my pet issues now. So it. Don't be afraid of the truth, and don't be afraid of what will happen if you change your stance as far as how it'll impact your ministry, your family, your relationships. We remember that you are we have the Spirit of truth in us, and it's, the Holy Spirit will lead us and reprove, rebuke, and exhort. And so you just have to trust in God in this issue. I was nervous about presenting it to my wife because I didn't know, she grew up King James only, and within some of that movement as well. And I didn't know if I could convince her to not be King James only. But I presented her the facts, let her study it herself. We talked about it. She prayed about it, and God led her to the exact same conclusion. Without any coercion.
All truth is God's truth, right? So God's going to be on the side of truth. So when you study it out, it's okay, because God's truth can withstand any criticism because it's the truth. Truth can withstand criticism. But so real quick here, and I know you've got some lash out a little bit when you shifted, a little bit. You got some letters from churches when you shifted your stance, and some of them were like, "We feel so betrayed," and you got so many weird emails. But that just goes to show how venomous some things can be. That's why this channel, why I started this channel was, okay, maybe we don't have to be so venomous, right? So real quick, and then we'll close it out. So in what ways do you see this impacting your future, Drew? Your major theological shift. You're splitting from traditions and preferences and diving into the realm of biblicism.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know that now I feel like I have a lot more opportunity to grow and to learn and to minister in different avenues, because I'm not as pigeonholed as ministry means, mounting a pulpit and delivering a sermon. That ministry is a lot of things. And worshiping God through ministry can take on different forms, right? So there's a world of possibility open to us. I also feel like I'm able to learn things faster because I don't have to filter it through this particular worldview that would kind of muddy the process. It'd be like, well, the only conclusion I can come to is this is wrong, So I feel like, I think, right now we're not serving in a vocational ministry standpoint, but working at the karate school, I've had opportunity to minister in different ways, and it looks a little bit different now, but it's still showing the love of Christ to people. And it still brings me joy, and I feel like I'm making a difference in people's lives. And there's also a lot of pressure off of me because although I'm an extrovert and I am an outgoing person and I love I'll talk to a brick wall. I mean,
True.
Like Drew talk. Okay, here, just near him. I could go for forever. But I am not I don't have that soul winner type of personality where I am just totally okay with going up and kind of out of the blue, dropping the gospel on somebody. And, maybe I need to be better at that. I don't know. But all I know is that now I don't feel so much pressure that that's the only avenue you have for witnessing and sharing the gospel with people is by doing that. Now there's other ways that I can work in relationships with people that lead them to a gospel conversation.
Oh, I mean, 80% of church growth is from personal relationships. So I am with you 100% on that. That's why I try every person that comes into the church, I try to make a personal connection with, get to know them, connect with people, even customers at my bivocational job, whatever. So there's a lot obviously to unpack here. And so we might have to have you on again to reassess some things and just talk about other topics. It'll be fun. But after
great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So after everything you've experienced, because you've experienced both sides now, and you've also experienced vitriol for some of your shift, but you also experienced a lot of grace. Like some people actually just was really supportive of you, some good pastors and stuff. So it's not all bad when these shifts happen. It's just when you make a shift, things are going to happen. But after some of your experiences, what is the best way to promote unity without compromising the true faith?
You really got to nail down what is theologically vital and what's not. Part of our training at ABWE was how to work, Association of Baptist World Evangelism, was how to work with people that believe differently, right? And how to think through, that there are vital issues that we separate over. There are doctrinal issues that you might disagree with, but you could still fellowship and even work with that person at varying degrees of closeness based on that particular issue. And then there's preferences that you work with those people despite that. And so, like examples, vitally important things: the virgin birth, the deity of Christ, the inspiration of Scripture. Those are kind of things that, like, if somebody is like, I don't believe the Bible is inspired, then it's like, okay, I have to separate from you. I love you, but I have to, I can't. That's a biblically mandated thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Virgin birth, the deity of Christ. If you don't believe Christ is the Son of God, what are you doing? And, it's like, fellowship with you, it's not a club. Why you call it a church? Things that you could maybe find wiggle room on are, we were talking about this the other day, like certain things of eschatology. Like I tend to be pre-trib, premillennial, but if I am talking to somebody who's mid-trib or even post-trib, it's like, I disagree with you, but, let's go serve Jesus together. That's fine.
Yeah, eschatology is funny when people freak out over them. Like, the Jews thought they had the prophecy about Messiah figured out, and they didn't. So why are we arguing over this? It's such a silly thing. Right. Now,
even within that, if you don't believe Jesus is coming back, it's like, well, okay, that's very explicitly in Scripture.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's big things and smaller things, and then preferential things: dress, Bible version, music. The big three are actually the minor three. Things like just lots of things like that.
No, it's funny because it
don't matter.
The church
I learned to categorize.
Even the church I first pastored, I am, me, I'm a perfectionist by nature. And so much like Melinda, although I think Melinda is a little bit worse than me. And for me, like, I came to Door Baptist, and Door Baptist, they as their pastor, it's a lot more, held together by prayers and bubble gum. It's a little bit more like laid back. It was so different from such a structured approach that I'm used to. And I remember that was a preference that I was like, oh, this is dry. I got to be okay with it, though. I got to be okay with this. Not my church, it's God's church. And so I think that's good. Identify what the core issues are that you have to break fellowship. Deity of Christ. That's why we don't fellowship with Jehovah's Witnesses, really. We try to witness to them, which I actually successfully have. I got one. Hey.
Bam.
Then we got, so Jehovah's Witnesses, deity of Christ. But at the same time, then there's things like, or predestination is another one. Like, I have friends that are mine are Calvinistic. Yeah. I have some friends mine are Armenian. Guess what? They all believe in Jesus Christ. And, I'm a Molinist. So, I don't make anyone happy. So, but at the same time, these are areas where we can fellowship still and work in the cause of Christ. And then, of course, obviously the preferences can go, man. Preferences, yeah, I have my preferred things, but baby doesn't always get what baby wants, and I have to be willing to work with that. So I'm sure that some of the disciples would prefer not to go what they went through too, so whatever.
And then, the other thing along with that is once you've nailed those down, then be careful about your attitude. Coming from both the different movements, the movement that I was in, the more traditional movement, would speak with such vitriol and venom and anger, and just it sounded like hatred about people that were in contemporary churches, whereas contemporary church people would talk about so and so that runs that particular style, that other style of church. They're like, oh, he's a great brother, he really loves the Lord, they're doing a great thing there. And we tried to help them. We tried to, and I hear that a lot. Is we tried to reach out to them to serve together, and they wouldn't respond.
Very separatist, yeah.
Nail those things down. Don't be a fighting fundamentalist. Be a loving, gracious fundamentalist, or whatever term you use to define your theological standpoint.
Absolutely.
Do it in grace, and only flip the tables and drive the money changers out when you have to, because Jesus did do that, but he only did it once.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, yeah, so. Yeah, true. Just well put. I don't need to add to that, really. But anyhow, so I just really want to take the time to just say thank you for being on. I know it's a long interview, but I think there's a lot of people out there that can relate to that. One day I'll tell my own testimony on here. I just don't want it to be, as although I am the front man of this, I don't want it to be the Will Hess show. I want to talk about more important issues, and I think it's great that people are hearing... Oh.
Now it's the Will Hess's hair show.
True. Right. Whatever. Quarantine makes me do wild things. But anyway, Drew, thank you for being on. Thank you for those. I think there's some things at least you challenge people on there. I think some perspective issues I think will help people. And I know there's some people who are going to find it a blessing. So thanks for being on, man. And look forward to talking to you soon. Probably here in about 5 minutes after the call.
Probably, yeah. Thanks for having me on, and I'd love to come back.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Love you. Anyhow, thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Drew. You can go ahead and follow them. I think Rights to the Deaf. I know they are still working with the deaf ministry and whatnot at their church. But if nothing else, guys, hope that was a challenge to you. Hope it was encouragement to you. And that's what I want to do here. I want to promote real biblical issues and talk about real issues with people and relationships. So thank you guys for being here today. And this has been The Church Split.